and today our topic is defining and non-defining relative clause. A relative clause is one of these subordinate clauses, and it is actually introduced by relative pronouns. But relative clauses are of two types. One is defining relative clause, another is non-defining relative clause. So let me start. Defining relative clause. Defining relative clause is that relative clause which gives about some special feature of the noun. It gives a special feature. It gives us information about a special feature of the noun, and it is restricted because it gives that special feature to us. It gives that special characteristics or special point or special nature of the noun. My mother, who is a vegetarian, lives in a convent. This is the defining relative clause, because this relative clause gives a special feature, special characteristics of my mother. So this is a defining relative clause. Another example: gorillas that are powerful animals are loved by men. Here we find this relative clause, and this relative clause gives information, special feature of gorillas. So this part is not restricted, not defining the gorilla, but it gives only a special characteristics of gorillas. And in defining relative clauses, we don't find any punctuation mark other than this full stop. We don't find any punctuation mark other than this one. So this is, in these two examples, we can easily understand that the relative clause that gives just a special news or special information about the noun is a defining or restricted or restrictive relative clause. The Americans who value education are now going down in their principle. Here we find this relative clause, and it gives just the characteristics feature of the Americans. So all these are examples of defining relative clause, and all these relative clause we find there is no punctuation mark other than this full stop. Now let me explain non-defining relative clause. Non-defining relative clause. Non-defining relative clause are unrestricted relative clause that gives additional information about the noun, and it is usually indicated by a comma beside the noun. Example 1. Our teachers who come from far away places teach us sincerely. In this sentence we find that there is an additional information about our teacher, and this additional information is, this additional quality is indicated and introduced by this relative clause, and this part is separated by this comma. This is the main characteristics of our teachers is this: our teachers teach us sincerely. This is their main characteristics, but the additional characteristics of them is they come from far away places. This is an example of non-defining relative clause. Another example: Indian footballers who are weak in health Indian footballers who are weak in health cannot compete in the World Cup. This is relative clause, and this gives an additional information about the Indian footballers. This is the additional information that is provided or given or supplied by this relative clause. So this relative clause is non-defining relative clause. Example 3. The street children who are in most of the cases orphans, the street children who are in most of the cases orphans are beaten by dogs. This relative clause is giving the additional information about the street children. Their main destiny is being beaten by the dogs, but apart from this destiny, they have additional quality or situation. They are in most of the cases orphans.